we are so pumped to have documentary filmmaker Matthew Guthrie with us today. He's going to discuss his newest film called Follow the Silence. It's an important look at those that were injured in the COVID vaccine trials. So, welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Rebecca. It's nice to meet you finally.
I
Yeah,
know. We've been trading some texts and some emails, so this is such an honor to have you
thank you.
in studio to kind of hear a little bit more about your heart for this film. So let's start off by just saying, how about you tell us a little bit about your background, who you are, and what led you to create documentary films?
Sure. Well, I can tell you what sort of specifically led to this film, and it started when I was a kid. So I was a really sick child. I had really bad hay fever and allergies and asthma, and I was basically just ill all the time. So
Mm.
I had like pneumonia 6 times a year. And I was in the hospital so much between the age of, 0 and 6
Wow.
that, I mean, like nurses were like my best friends. I knew the hospital staff really well. They loved me, right? So I had this really amazing interaction with the medical community as a child that was really ultra positive. I mean, I'll never forget the day that Nintendo came out, like the original NES Nintendo. These nurses just lit up happy, rolled one into a room, and mind you, I'm in like an oxygen tent at the time, like
Wow.
because I was like that sick, and I was so happy to do that. So I guess like to say that I have an extremely positive experience with doctors, and I did as a child. So fast forward a few years, my sister, I lost my sister in 1993 to medical negligence.
Mm.
So after all of that I had been through, when she was 7 years old and I was 9, she got Rocky Mountain spotted fever, and it was misdiagnosed by 3 different doctors. And a story that happened to me that I actually end up hearing over and over again in this film was our family doctor, right? The doctor that Whitney had seen her whole life, was not in town during this time when the onset of her symptoms began. So he referred us to another doctor that he knew and he trusted. And that ended up being the doctor that was probably the most guilty of negligence and malpractice. And I'll never forget when my sister had had a seizure and I was out of town. My dad and I were out of town. We had to rush to this hospital. And here's my sister in a bed, blue, 7 years old. Never even, she was fine the last time I saw her. It was only a few days. She went from, I have like a bit of a flu. I think I'm going to go home. We're going to go home okay. I was at my grandparents', right? So we'll stay a few extra days. So within 72 hours, she's in a hospital bed, unable to talk, doesn't know who she is, doesn't know who anybody is, can't speak, can't, I mean, she's looking at my mom and us in the room and disassociating with us because she's really sick and we don't know what's happening. And I remember this doctor was on call, and he was supposed to come in at like 4 or 5 a.m. And my dad and I showed up a little before 8 a.m., and he still wasn't there. And he's the guy that's supposed to be there. He walks in, he puts a tongue depressor in my sister's mouth, who's blue and can't breathe, and is changing colors in front of us. Looks at my mother, says, she's going to be fine. I think she just a spoiled brat or something awful like that. I'm going to subscribe you some Valium, and then walked out of the room. Less than 10 minutes later, she had a massive seizure and died right there. So I have a long experience with this. When I started seeing the first news clips of people who had taken to social media, people that Senator Ron Johnson held a hearing in Milwaukee, I'm sure you know, right?
Yeah.
So I saw that. And I saw Stephanie DeGarry and Bree, and now these are the people that ends up becoming the core group of characters in my film. I didn't know them at the time, but I saw that video. I know what it looks like when a mom is crying. Like I grew up with that. I know what it looks like when parents are hurt and lost and don't know what to do and they're desperate for their child.
Mm.
I know that intimately. Sorry. So I had to do something. I felt like my life experience, like I was built to do this. So, I've been a filmmaker for 20 years. It's a, a tough business, to do. The reason that I'm doing documentaries right now and the reason I did this one, because journalism failed people. And I saw that journalism was failing people desperately. And in this country, in a free society, if there's two sides of a coin, both sides of that coin need to be spoken equally for there to be free society, for there to be free thought, informed consent.
Yeah.
When I saw that being removed and when I saw journalism cowering under a single narrative, I was like, well, that isn't journalism. I'm not a journalist. but I knew that something had to be done. So it was like God put it on my heart. I had a dear friend that started working for the High Wire with Dale Bigtree, and he brought me to the studio right before I was leaving for a job that was overseas. It was I shot with a dear friend of mine in Costa Rica for several weeks. Right before I left, he's like, "I want you to meet everybody at the High Wire." Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Incredible operation. Some of the most beautiful, wonderful people in the world that I love very much. They're like a family to me. And I'm sitting in that control room, and this is the day that they're airing the first 3 nurses that had been injured that had really intense neuropathy and were having the shaking fits and tremors. They were in the studio. So they had taped it the day before, and I'm watching it air, and I'm listening to these nurses, listening to them talk about this, having just seen Maddie and Bree and everybody. And I just knew in my gut, and I was like, this is going to get worse. Somebody's got to do something. And when I was in Costa Rica, I literally had a moment one day where I woke up and I felt like Jesus had put something on my heart and told me, like, there's something coming at you, and you have to do it.
Wow. Well, I'm so thankful that you listened to that small still voice, because
Yeah.
these stories must be told. They absolutely must be told, and they're not getting told
No.
um, elsewhere. So thank you. So, what message are you hoping to convey in Follow the Silenced in this movie?
Well, the film, we call it Follow the Silenced. And in that, we say that this is the hidden story of the human cost of censorship.
Mm.
Because really, that's what it is. If there's a lot of common denominators with everybody that's in this film, but one of the largest ones is that everybody in this film was censored from society. Whether they were physicians that spoke out, whether they were injured physicians, or the large cast of people that are everyday Americans that were injured themselves, they were removed from the conversation. Um, so the heart of the movie, really, though, is real love. Like, I mean, I love stories and I love people, and when you find a human story that is this deep and it shows you the profound, empathetic, godly nature of ourselves, of our natural being, right? We have an ability to empathize with each other in a crisis. Unlike any other creature on earth, humans can do this. And that's ultimately what happens is these people that were injured, so the 2 of the main characters were in the trial, Bree Dressen and Maddie DeGarry. Bree's our sort of central character because she kind of becomes a biblical character, really. And when I first started making phone calls and getting introduced to people, I didn't know anybody. I just started cold calling and,
Right.
and just one call to the next, one referral to the next, land and Bree. And right away you hear this, like, she'll hate me for saying it, but it's like this biblical Moses-like character where she didn't want to be this person, but she knew that she had to,
Mm.
you know? So when you have all these people that are strangers that find each other from all over the country, who form a family of support and care and love, and since they've been abandoned by the pharmaceutical companies, by their doctors, right, by the government, by everyone, so not only can they not get care, but there's no treatments really,
Right.
and and everybody's going to ignore them. So what do? They have to figure out how to do that for themselves, and that's the beauty and the human spirit of this story is, despite being abandoned by everybody, they find a way to take care of each other. They find a way to figure out what's happening in their bodies, the treatments that are working. While the rest of the government and the pharmaceutical companies, insurance, doctors, et cetera, just have abandoned them completely. And they figured out how to do it on their own. So there's many, many themes in this movie. Um, there's a lot of evidence that the American public hasn't seen. One of the reasons, like Mickey said earlier, that this is supposed to be like a 3-6 month thing that's turned into 2 years, it was because of what we kept finding. Over and over again, I would turn over a rock and go, "You're kidding me."
Mm.
That connects to this. One of the things that you find with a story this complex is that when you look at an individual piece of information or evidence, it doesn't look like much alone. But when you look at the context of that, when you see how it fits into a larger web and from a larger perspective, a bird's eye view, if you will,
Yeah.
suddenly it means so much more. And that one sentence that didn't seem like it was so important is everything.
Yeah.
You know, we have found that so many times. We're still trying to cut the movie down.
Wow.
I'm at a point now where I'm trying to decide if I should release it in 2 parts, even though that feels strange to do, to release it in 2 parts. But it may be the right thing to do just because of the sheer amount that we have and that we've uncovered in this film.
Wow. So I understand that you're kind of in the final stretch. I know obviously you're still deciding whether we're doing one longer-ish film or two pieces, but as you kind of enter this final stretch, is there one or two just kind of personal stories from your time on the road interviewing these souls that has impacted you the most, or that you just like to share?
Gosh, it's hard to say that one hasn't impacted me more. You know, I can tell you in 2 years, I haven't had one day where I haven't cried my eyes out.
Mm,
Not one day in 2 years. You know, I started in August of 21, and I've been doing it straight. Um, you know, I'd say one of the things that I uncovered that sort of affects everybody in this, that is something that the American public really doesn't understand yet, but they're going to when this film comes out, is how the government used social media companies to target and destroy those support groups.
mm,
So the media would say, well, here's a community of anti-vaxxers on Facebook, right?
yeah,
And they would say, well, we're doing what we can to remove this disinformation. Well, what the American public doesn't know is that those weren't anti-vaxxers. Those were people who were the first in line to get
yeah,
vaccinated, were injured, didn't know what to do, found each other, formed a support group, and literally just message each other in the middle of the night and say, I'm having this, I'm having that. What do you do? Try this, try that. It's okay, you're gonna make it. I mean, it's like if you were in Alcoholics Anonymous and somebody just shut your entire group down and then put a case of booze in front of you and just said, "Good luck."
yep,
You know what I mean? Like, it's wicked, it's awful, and and I don't think that there's one social media company that wasn't complicit in that. And the terrifying thing is that, and brings me no pleasure to say this, but the more you trace that to its source, it's the White House,
mm,
it's Rob Flattery, the Twitter documents. Like, that's what was so incredible is those documents are the policies of the people's story that I captured. I was right in the middle of their lives filming this while that was going on. And when those Twitter files came out, it blew our mind because we were just like, "You're kidding me.
yeah.
We have all of that." We just didn't have the hard document to sit down and say, "Here it is."
They are actually are evil. Yes.
Yeah. And you know, the thing is that one thing that we really should do is there's been so much division over this issue, and it's so polarizing and it's so stigmatizing, right? People have to understand, if you didn't get a vaccine, you got to realize that the people that did so out of love. They did so from a deep, profound place of love for themselves, for their community, for their family. They had no reason to think that they were being misled.
Right.
They didn't. And we shouldn't be angry, and one side really should never be angry at the other. The people that questioned the vaccine were right to. And we have more than enough evidence in this film that shows, like, here's hard scientific data we can't argue with.
Right.
Right? I mean, and those people that were called anti-vaxxers, they just wanted more science. They wanted more data. There were people that had autoimmune issues, right? Knowing that, well, you didn't test that in the trial participants. Show me the trial participants that have the same autoimmunity issues that I do. I'll take it once you
Right.
show me that. Oh, you don't have that information.
I'm gonna maybe wait.
Yeah,
And
maybe
this
I'd
is not anti-science. Yes.
exactly. And that's the thing about it is you know, and that's why the irony of calling it Follow the Silenced is I literally ran across the country for 2 years following the science
Mm.
through those people, through these doctors, through their experiences, through their medical records. And the science that I uncovered makes a lot more sense now that I'm on this side of it.
Wow. Well, can you discuss your challenges along the way making this film on bringing this issue to light? Um, any obstacles or resistance that you've encountered?
Well, a lot of resistance, that's for sure. I mean, it's like the most controversial topic,
Yeah.
you know. And I think I'm glad that I'm doing it because I have a profound love for people, and I see everybody just on the same plane as me. I have this deep, compassionate love that just permeates everyone, right? So I think that allows me to sit into a space like this that's super controversial and find a way to destigmatize it and depolarize it by being disarming, and not in a manipulative way, but in like this, in a genuine, authentic way, because that's what
Absolutely.
I'm looking for, is let's have a conversation, you know? Um, but yeah, resistance and obstacles has been pretty much every turn you could imagine. I've Part of the production of this was just me doing it by myself. I realized really early on with this kind of a story that I was going to be able to travel consistently and constantly. And that means that with a budget that's tight, that means that I'm going to have to do this myself. So dragging 700 pounds of stuff around the country for 2 years was a little bit of a challenge. I just did it in LA, and I was like, okay, I think I'm getting tired of this. But yeah, I would say that I've been really clandestine about this movie. I've been really, I mean, I have people in my life that are close to me that I love very much that have no idea where I've been for 2 years or what I'm doing. And I think some of the resistance and stuff is going to come when the film comes out. And I think I'll have a much better answer to that probably in a few months.
Very good. Well, what are your hopes for this documentary as far as its impact on the public and policy making?
That's a great question. Impact on the public would be, we have to do something about assumed trust in this country. We assume trust in institutions, and we never should. You know, it's like people have this thing about them that if somebody walks into a room with a lab coat on, that they're trustworthy, that they're a good doctor because they went to medical school.
Mhm.
And that's not the case. You know, in my life experience, I've been through that. I know the difference between a good doctor and a potentially dangerous one. So impact on the public would be, look, when the media is in lockstep with a narrative, that should be the barometer of the lie,
Mhm.
unfortunately. I mean, we live in that age where legacy media really has become the opposite of truth, almost across the board, you know? So, I mean, if you use that as a way to navigate life, it can actually serve you, because now you can see, okay, well, everybody's saying this. Clearly, it means the opposite's probably true,
Right.
you know? And if you're not allowed to talk about these things, if you're not allowed to talk about those people, question that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's when I grew up, that was the things that we learned was, if be wary when people don't question. Be wary if there's only one side of a conversation and you're not allowed to have the other side. That should be a warning.
Absolutely.
Policy? Well, there's a lot. The vaccine injured need compensation. They need medical care. They need to be recognized. So insurance codes have to change. The FDA, something I'm holding very close to the chest that I don't want to really talk about until we're ready to release the film, is there's a story that's happened inside of the FDA that I have. And it's a story that's been withheld from the public the whole time. And when you understand what happened in these conversations and in these phone calls, Zoom calls, and and emails, when you see that in context to what was happening outside at the time with the mandates, it's eye-opening. So there's not one agency in the Department of Health and Human Services that shouldn't be questioned and brought before a court. Not one. The heads of the NIH, the heads of the CDC, and the heads of the FDA are all implicated in this. They all knew that the damage was there. All of the stuff that we set up to identify the potential safety signals in this product were all triggered in December of 2020.
Mm.
They were triggered before the public even got it. When the physicians got it, it was known right away. It was known in the trials. They have the documentation of the trials. Why do you think they wanted to hold it for 75 years? That doesn't sound like a group of people that want to tell you the truth.
No.
And so the policy is like, there's a revolving door that's been happening for decades. That's another reason why I got involved, because I'd seen that with the opioid crisis.
Mhm.
Alex Gibney is an incredible documentary filmmaker. He made a film called Crime of the Century. It's a 2-part documentary on HBO about the opioid crisis. In that film, he uncovers that at one point, the DEA was involved in a task force. I don't know if you've ever heard this story. It's surprisingly, it's not one that the public really knows, even though it's known public information. So the DEA had figured out that there were people that they were stopping in like Brooklyn, New York, that had a literal trunk full of prescription opioids. Yeah, all from different people.
Huh.
And I mean a literal trunk load. And they were like, well, where did this come from? Well, they trace it back to Florida, to a number of to a number of like CVS's and Walgreens and stuff like that in Florida. So they create this task force, and they realize that there are doctors all over the country that are writing prescription for opioids, like common drug dealers on the street. People come in, say that I need, I have back pain.
Right.
They get a prescription. There are people coming in that were known addicts, right? And so anyway, long story short, all of this information was gathered. The DEA set out and busted this huge task force, right? Busted people all over the United States, made a huge dent in this problem. Then our government got involved. Pharmaceutical companies, Purdue specifically, went to Congress and bought them out one at a time. And in the movie, it shows how much money they were paid. And they're 6 and 7 figures apiece. And they created a bill to stop the DEA from doing this, from stopping the from stopping the doctors from prescribing the opioids, right? So they said, well, you're getting in the way of people's access to pain medication. How could you do that? The opioid crisis went on for another decade.
Mm.
How many people and lives were lost because of that? So, right? So it's like
That's heavy.
that revolving door is still happening today. Scott Gottlieb was head of the FDA, left in July of 2020 or 2019. It was instrumental because where did he go? Board of Pfizer. He's instrumental in getting Pfizer to be first to market.
That's right.
Right? Who's the biggest title sponsor in every major media company in the United States today?
Pfizer.
Pfizer.
Yep.
How could you speak out against your title sponsorship? What country in the world besides the United States allows pharmaceutical companies to market directly to consumers?
New Zealand.
So there's 2 of us.
Two.
You
Two
got me on that. I
countries.
thought it was just the U.S. So it is New Zealand. There's 2.
I believe there's 2. If the audience will correct us
we'll
if we're
get
wrong,
corrected
but
on
my
that.
understanding is that there were 2. That
Mhm.
only 2 countries on the planet allow this direct-to-consumer marketing for pharmaceutical
Yeah.
products, and you can't escape it. You
Yeah.
can't watch a single television show or news broadcast without this constant barrage of, we have the magic pill that will solve this problem in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what's startling is that a whole nation of people don't seem to think that's a problem. Pardon me. A whole nation of people don't think that's an issue. That revolving door is the reason that things happen the way that they do. It's the reason that these safety signals are ignored.
Yes.
It's the reason that this stuff is corrupt. And it shouldn't surprise people. I mean, what gets me is like we can watch a Jason Bourne movie as an American audience and we can be riveted. And we can watch every minute of this conspiracy unfold and be enthralled as an audience and get it from outside of that fourth wall as an audience member. But when that happens in front of your face in real life, you can't see it.
No.
It's case in point. One of the things that frightens me with where this is going with like mRNA is something called pre-market approval, which is within the FDA. So there's a documentary that I saw, one of the anonymous people, there's a few whistleblowers that I have in this film that I have to protect them because the real threats to the medical community is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know people that have lost families, jobs, moved across the country. It's hard to put into words, to be honest. But anyway, one of them turned me on to a film called The Bleeding Edge, and it's about medical devices, right? So there's something in the medical devices world, and we're going to hear about this soon with vaccines.
We are.
You probably already know where I'm going
Mm-hmm.
with this. So basically what it means is like if you need a new hip, right, you're going to get a hip replacement. Well, pre-market approval means that if I have a new hip that I've made as a manufacturer and I want to get an FDA approval for my new hip, right, all I have to do is prove that the hip that I've designed is similar in design or nature to another product that's already had FDA approval. So this new product that I've made, I don't have to put in humans. I don't have to trial. I just have to prove that on paper, it's similar to another product.
Yep.
Pre-market approval. What do you think they're going to do with mRNA as a basis, as a product to put products into your body? Because, I mean, that's what it does. It's using your own biological systems to print and create products inside of your body. So all they have to do now is just put in whatever information they want. Say it's an mRNA-based vaccine, pre-market approval.
That's right. Well, and it reminds me of just how much we lack true placebo-based testing on not just these medical devices, but also all vaccines, be it the mRNA or the ones that have been around for a longer time. I mean, it's all built on this assumption of safety. If this one doesn't create any more, safety signals of this one that's been around forever, then it's deemed safe. But it's all kind of just built on this bed of lies. There's no product at the bottom of all of that that was truly placebo-based, randomized, controlled, trialed. It's not. It's all built on this house of cards. And that pre-market approval is such a gross disservice to every citizen because it's not science. And we need to demand more.
You're right.
For
You're
sure.
right. Absolutely. And that's why I'm so glad that we've partnered with you guys and that we're working with you, because it's like, just like you just said, right? There's this whole history of the science of vaccines that we should all know, and we should be a part of that conversation, right? Because that's true informed consent, is to have both sides of that conversation. And that was something. What's hard for people to wrap their mind around is like the VCIP, for example, right? And why was that created? Like, people don't know that if vaccines were hurting kids to the point where the vaccine manufacturers were being sued, to the point where they called the government and said, look, we're not going to make any more vaccines if you're going to keep allowing us to be sued to this nature. It's just not profitable. And they're like, okay, well, hold on. We'll make a deal. We'll create a fund. We'll give you legal liability or legal immunity from injuries from these vaccines, but you got to put money in a compensation fund. That way, if something happens, there's plenty of money there. Well, there's billions and billions of dollars in that fund from years and years and years of these vaccines. Well, what people don't go back and look at is, so when that happened in 1986, how many vaccines were we having at the time? Like 5, 6, maybe 7?
There were the 1983 schedule, if you tease out all of the jabs, as the triple ones are really 3, so it was 24 injections in 1983, and currently in 2023 we're up to 77.
77 throughout the course, and that's in what, 18, 20 years of your life, I think, right? It's spread out throughout that time. So what's fascinating is people don't want to look at it and say, you just gave a whole industry that is for profit an opportunity to skirt any liability legally for any damages. So where did you encourage them to create a good product? Where's their incentive to create something safe? If you have legal immunity from damages, and they're like, well, you can go to this fund if something happens, and then you can't get anything from that fund because statistically that fund doesn't pay out. Not in decades.
No.
Billions of dollars in funds, but if there's no such thing as a vaccine injury, who are we supposed to pay? Right? And it's designed to be corrupt. It's like if you're a building manufacturer, or I'm sorry, if you're an architect and you're building condos, right? And your condos keep collapsing and hundreds of people die every time your condo collapses. How crazy would it be to ask the city for immunity from that?
Right.
Because the city's like, well, you can't do that. People are dying and this is a problem. Well, I'm not going to make condos anymore. If you want condos, you're going to have to give me legal immunity. Well, where's the incentive for the architect to buy good building material, to build a strong base? There's not one.
In 1986, we removed all incentive for safe and effective products. I mean, I can't think of a more beautiful marketing model for Big Pharma. You have a captive audience. People think they're mandated. They have to do it. And there's no recourse if their children or themselves are injured. It's great for the pharmaceutical companies. It leaves everybody out to dry. And vaccine injury, I've started talking about this a lot when we do events. This is not a conspiracy theory or an urban myth. I mean, vaccine injury is codified in our legal statutes. I would love to have been a fly on the wall back in the mid 80s to see what they were thinking on granting this complete liability shield. And no other product is essentially mandated with no consumer protections. And we're a country that's kind of obsessed with consumer protections. And what are we doing here?
I know, right? It's exactly. And I think that's the thing is, it's like, until you know that, until you really can get past the stigma and just really look at the facts, and make your own opinions based on that information, then how are you going to get to that conclusion, right? Because if everybody's told you that vaccines are safe or else, and you're a bad person if you think otherwise, I mean, that's great propaganda. You're not
Yeah.
going to go look into that and go, oh, wow, there's some really basic common elements here that are not a conspiracy, but
No.
they're concerning. Like, that's a policy that shouldn't happen. Like you said, we're a consumer-based society, and yet so many of the things that we have for policies put us at a terrible disadvantage all the
Absolutely.
time.
Yep.
And it protects companies, and it protects pocketbooks, and it doesn't protect people.
No.
And then, one of the things that you had asked earlier was about this film, like what I hope people take from it.
Yeah.
That kind of brought this up in my mind, but there's a lot of data in this film, a fantastic amount of data. And what I want people to understand is that those numbers are people. They're people with rich lives. And there is a tragedy that's unfolded, and there is a loss of life that has been hidden from us. And we can't turn our faces from this. I think there's people that, and I understand people want to stop talking about it. I get it. You want to move on with your life, but we can't move on from this
You're right.
until we dig into it all the way, until we put every magnifying glass in the world on this. Get to the bottom of it. Learn from this. We need new public health policies in a way that we've never do. We need a once in a 1,000-year literal reapproach to healthcare in this country. Because one of the things I think this film will do, when people, if they really give it time and they really receive it, you are going to walk away with a dramatic new perception of what public health in this country means. And we need to fix that. And these people aren't going to police themselves,
Mm-mm.
but we have to figure out how all of us as individual people can form stronger, more local communities and get together and talk to each other and start to figure out what we need to do to fix this problem, because it is a monstrous problem. And if we don't fix this, it will not stop, because the next time is coming and it'll be infinitely worse
Yes.
next time. And we have to learn everything we can from this. And I really hope, if one of the things that we all learn is that we are stronger together. It doesn't matter if we have differing opinions. We're human beings and we're Americans. We're people of this world.
Yeah.
There's a common element within us that it's like it's harder for us. It's harder for us to not be in that community, right? Like,
Right.
all we have to do is just let go of the resistance within us. Like,
Yeah.
and we can't imagine the strength that I think we're going to have an incredibly new perception of what it means to be healthy in the future. I think we'll have a fantastic new approach to governance. I think we're going to awaken people's individual freedom in a way because it's never been challenged so clearly. And as awful as all of this has been, I mean, I'm with what Mickey said. It's the tribulations that teach us.
Yep.
The things that are hard are what we learn the most from. And we can use this awful experience to make us a better people, to make us better individuals, and to have a much stronger, more robust approach to healthcare.
That's right. I mean, I don't even know what to say, because that was a lot of profoundness that you just said. But, I just think about how vaccine injury knows no political party. It knows no race. It knows no socioeconomic status. I mean, it is something that unites. I mean, it's the worst club to be a part of, right? And I don't wish it on anyone. But if we can collectively come together and kind of reapproach what true health is, that is something that I'm here for.
And that's
Yeah.
in the film. The group that forms calls themselves React 19 is how they eventually, that's the group that forms out of this. Sorry, I lost track of what I was saying there. Yeah, sorry, my brain. Too
That's
many
okay.
too many hours on a plate.
Yeah. Well, we can wrap up. I just am so thankful for your work. I pray every night that God would just continue to protect the truth tellers. And so I count you at the top. So thank you. And it's been a real honor to not just visit with you today personally, but to partner with you on this venture. I've seen the trailer. I think a small trailer was released on Twitter a couple of weeks ago, and I saw that. So I'm excited about seeing a longer trailer and, of course, the film when it is released. So any final thoughts you want to share with our audience?
Yeah. After I just remembered what I was going to say finally.
Okay, good.
to your point about that, the vaccine injuries know no political ideology. The most of the people that are in my film that I've captured, they're registered Democrats. They were the first to get in line. They're the most staunch believers in science, and they're the best people in the world.
Yep.
And they have the greatest heart for people. And that's the thing. It's like, if you're a conservative person, take the opportunity to heal the wounds that has happened in your life. If you're a liberal person too. But one of the things I hear from the people that are injured is, for the left, I'm injured, so I'm not in the camp anymore. So I'm lost. For the right, I got the vaccine and I deserved it. So where does that leave them? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's a large community of people that grows daily. So if you have love in your heart, reach out to people. Call them. Call the person that you haven't talked to in the last 3 years. Call the person that you don't agree with ideologically anymore. Tell them that you love them, that they're important to you, that your life and your experience together is more important than a disagreement. Because the moment we talk to each other again, when we have differing opinions, that's when new ideas form. And I don't know why we've lost that, but I would encourage everybody, no matter what side of the political aisle you're on, if there's one thing you can do, heal every division that you can. Heal every broken friendship, every piece of your family that's been splintered by this. Call them and tell them that you love them. And start working on connecting back, because that's the strongest thing we can do. The best thing we can do is live from a true place of unconditional love for each other.
Amen. Amen. I think that's a great place to wrap up. Again, thank you for being here, and we look forward to Follow the Silenced, which will be coming soon in the next few months.
Yeah,
What's
we're November. We're getting
November?
close. We're
Yes.
aiming for November.
All right. Thank you again.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Yes.